Well, good afternoon. 5 years ago, I sat in a room with my cohort, much smaller than this, in cohort size and room size, and heard two dissertations, both of which influenced my focus for the rest of my time in the program, and ultimately caused me to look in this area of research for my dissertation. As you can see, I'm looking at relational spirituality of adult students, particularly adult students in non-traditional programs, or what could be called degree completion programs, and even more particularly within the faith-based Association of Schools, the Council for Christian Colleges and Universities. So some of the rationale behind this study is there is a growing interest of assessing spirituality in higher education. Also, there's a growing number of adult students, and that, for definition purposes, I'm looking at students 25 years and older. And so they represent close to 50% of the undergraduate population in the United States today, and they're growing at a faster rate, So, and that's compared to the traditional age college student between the ages of 18 and 24. And the non-traditional program is becoming the program of choice. You can't turn on the TV without seeing a commercial for Phoenix or Kaplan or Coleman or something like that. So the degree completion program is becoming their program of choice. And within the CCCU, 110 institutions, there's over 60 institutions that have these types of programs. And with their mission, part of their mission being to influence the spirituality of students, I thought it important to look at how we're doing at impacting the spirituality of this group of students. So some of the problems that I addressed was the literature revealed that there was a lack of data for this population of students, and in particular, more specifically, as you could probably imagine, a lack of assessment data in terms of spirituality. And so the literature, I've got some names here for adult learning that you can look at, some of the forerunners in that field. But one of the things I wanted to point out in the non-traditional program literature was that I found interesting and added fuel to my fire was that the non-traditional program is the fastest growing new program being added to faith-based institutions. So again, that just really underscored my focus. And literally, I focused on this group of students from that very first two presentations. One was on andragogy, and the other was on religion and higher education. And just that, it's the two tracks of my focus throughout my whole time here. Some other names, you can't look at spirituality without hearing about Fowler and his faith development theory. But more specifically, relational spirituality is an emerging area of study within the field of relational psychology. So I was real happy to hear that there's kind of a transcending disciplines here. The spirituality is actually getting into mainstream in a sense. And also, being a pastor myself, finding out that there is literature and there's a growing consensus that there's a theological basis for this psychological construct. Very, very exciting for me. And some names of authors in that field. Spirituality in higher education, can't look at this without hearing about Aston and Chicory and Parks. But recent research that I found important and informative was the College Students' Beliefs and Values Survey. And this is part of a large longitudinal study started back in 2003 out of UCLA, and looking at both private and public institutions. And one of the findings they found was that students generally, 80% of the students have an interest in God, an interest in spirituality. And I found that important. And that a large percentage of students actually experienced spiritual growth while in college. That important. The Faithful Change Project, a project within the CCCU group of schools using Fowler's faith development model, finished up back in 2004, found also that students experienced spiritual growth while in college. And then the Furnishing the Soul project, which is somewhat related to mine, using the same instrument I have, is a longitudinal study that's just wrapping up within the CCCU, looking at spiritual growth with students. And they're actually just crunching the numbers right now. We hope to publish something here using some comparative data that we have. But one of the things that these three studies have in common is that none of them really focused on adult students. And so here I am. That's what I'm doing. My research questions are these, using the Furnishing the Soul inventory, with adult students in CCCU member schools. My first question was, what are the measures of spirituality for adult students in non-traditional programs? The second question was, how do measures of spirituality differ between adult students and traditional age students? And then I also wanted to look at, is there an age factor here? So I separated my adult group and I said, how do measures of spirituality differ within adult groups? So I made two groups, one 25 to 39, and the other group would be 40 years and older. So those are my three questions. My research design was simple. I had it quantitative, as we hear. Boy, it's like two camps. We should have, we should have a sporting event or some sort of competition. We have quantitative on one side and
Who wins?
I used a descriptive comparative design, a convenience sample method. I contacted 62 institutions, 22 actually participated in my survey. Thank you, Jesus, for that. I sent my survey out to approximately 8,000 students, 292 responded. Again, I'm very thankful for 292. It is a low response rate, though, so we've got to work on that. The instrument was the Furnishing the Soul Inventory by Dr. Todd Hall out of Biola. It was web-based, which made it possible to send it to 8,000 students. It's very large. It has 187 questions. Yeah, and it has 22 spirituality scales. And they're organized under 5 conceptual domains, which I'll briefly introduce here in a moment. But another thing that's important to higher education is the 19 program impact items that the survey includes. And these are questions asking the students about particular aspects of the program and to what extent that part of their time at school contributed to their spiritual growth. So you can probably see how answers to those questions would be important for higher education administration to know what part of their program is actually influencing spirituality. Reliability and validity, we had good mean alpha for the reliability testing, an overall 0.85, and it did, the 22 scales did correlate significantly with 22 similar faith-oriented scales, producing good construct validity. So it's a good, strong instrument. The analyses I used were very simple. I used descriptives and standard deviations and means, and I used t-tests to compare the traditional students with the adult students, and then also a t-test to compare the two adult groups. So here, let me get into what the FSI, or the Furnishing the Soul Inventory, actually gets at in terms of spirituality. 3 general areas. Relational spirituality is the first aspect that it really assesses, and that can be defined as the nature and quality of a relationship with God as demonstrated as the relational quality and style of relations with others. You see there's a correlation there. The second thing it gets at is spiritual vitality, and this could be defined as the capacity to have loving and caring relationships with others and with God. Lastly, it looks at spiritual transformation or change or growth, and this could be defined as the extent to which an individual is actually participating in the process of change in their spiritual vitality. Here are the 5 conceptual domains I mentioned: connecting to God, knowing God, attachment to God, which has 3 subdomains, and spiritual tipping points and furnishing the soul. They're very proprietary in nature, so they're not real descriptive in and of themselves, but they relate to those 3 aspects I just mentioned like this. The first 2 really get at that relational quality of one's relationship as demonstrated, their relationship with God is demonstrated as relations with others. The third one, their attachment to God, gets at the vitality or the capacity people have of having quality relations with others. And the last 2 really get at the idea of spiritual transformation and look at the various factors of the way people are participating in their spiritual growth.